On a narrow side street where the city seemed to breathe a little more slowly, there stood a small boutique cafe with warm yellow lights glowing gently through its windows every evening. The sign above the door simply read Side Street Boutique Cafe, written in soft golden letters that shimmered quietly under the street lamp. Inside, the air always carried the comforting scent of freshly ground coffee, warm milk, and a hint of cinnamon that drifted lazily through the room. The cafe was not large, only a few wooden tables, a long counter polished smooth by time, and a window seat where the afternoon sunlight liked to rest. Yet for those who knew it, the place felt like a calm harbor in the middle of the busy city. The owner, Mr. Arman, moved slowly and peacefully behind the counter each day, preparing cups of coffee with careful hands and a quiet smile that seemed to welcome everyone without needing many words. Outside, the sounds of traffic faded into a soft distant murmur, while inside the cafe clocks ticked gently and spoons clinked softly against porcelain cups. Every evening, as the sky turned shades of lavender and deep blue, a few familiar faces would begin to appear. They were the regulars, people who had found comfort in the cafe's quiet corners and warm light. An elderly man who liked to read old newspapers, a young woman who wrote in a small notebook, a taxi driver who always ordered the same tea, and a quiet artist who preferred the table near the window. None of them spoke very loudly, yet their presence created a calm rhythm that filled the cafe with quiet life. Some evenings they exchanged small smiles or brief greetings, while on other nights they simply shared the peaceful silence together. Outside, the street remained calm, the wind moving softly between the buildings. Inside, the cafe glowed gently like a lantern in the night, and the regulars settled into their favorite chairs as if they had always belonged there, like stars slowly appearing in a familiar evening sky. Every evening, almost at the same quiet moment when the sky began turning from pale gold to soft blue, the first regular of the Side Street Boutique Cafe would arrive. His name was Mr. Halden, an elderly man who walked slowly but steadily, carrying a neatly folded newspaper under his arm. His gray coat was always carefully buttoned, and his round glasses rested gently on the bridge of his nose as if they had found their home there many years ago. When he entered the cafe, the small bell above the door would ring softly, and Mr. Arman would look up from behind the counter with a calm nod of recognition. Without needing to ask, Mr. Arman would begin preparing a small cup of dark coffee. Just the way Mr. Halden liked it, warm, simple, and slightly strong. Mr. Halden always chose the same seat near the corner bookshelf, where the lamp cast a gentle pool of light over the wooden table. There he would sit quietly, unfold his newspaper with careful hands, and begin reading the day's stories as if they were old letters arriving from distant friends. Sometimes he paused to sip his coffee, letting the warmth travel slowly through his hands before placing the cup back on its saucer with a soft porcelain sound. The cafe around him remained peaceful, filled only with the low hum of quiet life. Outside, people hurried along the street, their footsteps fading quickly into the distance. But inside the cafe time seemed to move more slowly, like a calm river drifting through a quiet valley. Mr. Halden rarely spoke much, yet everyone in the cafe knew his gentle presence. Occasionally he would look up from the newspaper and give a small nod to someone entering the room, his eyes carrying the calm patience of someone who had seen many seasons pass. To the other regulars, he was like the first evening star appearing in the sky, quiet, reliable, and always arriving at just the right time. And as the soft lamplight rested over his newspaper pages, the little cafe continued its peaceful rhythm, welcoming the night one quiet moment at a time. Not long after Mr. Holden had settled into his corner with the gentle rustle of newspaper pages, the cafe door would open again with the soft ring of the small brass bell. This time it was usually Lena who stepped inside, carrying a narrow leather notebook and a pen that seemed to travel everywhere with her. Lena moved quietly, like someone who did not wish to disturb the calm air of the room. Her coat often carried the cool scent of the evening breeze, and a few strands of her dark hair would fall softly across her face as she looked around the cafe with a familiar, thoughtful smile. Mr. Arman would greet her with a warm nod and begin preparing her usual drink, a cup of mild honey tea whose gentle sweetness slowly filled the room with a comforting aroma. Lena always chose the small table near the window, where the street lamp outside cast soft golden reflections across the glass. From there she could watch the quiet life of the street while writing in her notebook. No one knew exactly what she wrote each evening. Some believed she was writing stories, while others imagined she might be recording small observations about the people and moments she noticed around her. Yet Lena never seemed in a hurry to fill the pages. She would write a few lines, pause to sip her tea, then watch the drifting evening outside as if gathering thoughts that floated slowly through the night air. Sometimes she smiled quietly at something she had written. And sometimes she simply rested her pen against the paper without moving it at all. Mr. Holden would occasionally glance toward the window and see her writing, and though they rarely spoke more than a polite greeting, there was a quiet understanding between them. The cafe itself seemed to appreciate Lena's calm presence. The ticking clock above the counter continued its gentle rhythm, spoons chimed softly against cups, and the warm light from the hanging lamps created small islands of comfort across the wooden tables. Outside, the street grew darker as the evening settled deeper into the city. But inside the side street boutique cafe, Lena's notebook slowly gathered its quiet words. One peaceful line at a time, like soft footsteps moving through a calm and thoughtful night. A little later in the evening, when the street outside had grown quieter and the sky had turned a deep shade of velvet blue, the cafe door would open once more with its familiar gentle bell. This time it was usually Kamal, the taxi driver, stepping inside after a long day of guiding his yellow car through the busy streets of the city. Kamal carried with him the faint scent of the road, cool night air, a trace of gasoline, and the tired calm of someone who had spent many hours watching the world pass through a windshield. Yet the moment he entered the side street boutique cafe, his shoulders always seemed to relax, as if the warm light inside helped the weight of the day slowly drift away. Mr. Arman already knew what to prepare. Without a word, he would place a small glass of strong black tea on a saucer and set it gently on the counter, a thin curl of steam rising quietly into the air. Kamal liked to hold the glass between his palms for a moment before drinking, enjoying the simple warmth after the cool night outside. He usually chose a seat near the middle of the cafe, where he could see both the door and the window, watching the calm rhythm of the room unfold around him. Sometimes he would greet Mr. Holden with a polite nod, or give Lena a friendly smile as she continued writing in her notebook. Though Kamal spoke a little more than the others, his voice was always soft. Careful not to disturb the peaceful atmosphere that everyone seemed to appreciate. Occasionally he shared a small story from the day, a passenger who had fallen asleep during a ride, or a street musician playing beneath the bridge, but even these stories were told slowly, like quiet waves rolling across a calm shore. As he sipped his tea, the sounds of the cafe blended into a gentle evening melody, the soft turning of newspaper pages, the quiet scratching of Lena's pen, and the steady ticking of the clock above the counter. Outside, a few distant cars passed along the street, their lights briefly reflecting across the window before fading into the night. Inside, Kamal's tea gradually cooled as the cafe continued its peaceful rhythm. And for a little while the long roads of the city felt far away, replaced by the quiet comfort of warm light, calm voices, and familiar faces. As the evening deepened and the cafe's warm lights began to glow more softly against the darkened windows, another familiar visitor would quietly appear at the door. His name was Daniel, though most of the regulars simply thought of him as the artist. Daniel arrived almost silently, carrying a worn canvas bag over his shoulder and moving with the gentle calm of someone who spent much of his time observing the world rather than rushing through it. When the bell above the door rang, he would pause for a moment just inside, letting his eyes adjust to the warm light of the cafe after the cool darkness outside. "Mr. Arman" would greet him with the same quiet nod he offered all the regulars. And soon a small cup of light roasted coffee would appear on the counter, waiting patiently for him. Daniel always chose the same table near the window, not far from where Lena wrote in her notebook. From there he could watch the quiet street outside, where the occasional passerby walked beneath the street lamp, their shadows stretching softly across the pavement. After sitting down, Daniel would carefully open his canvas bag and take out a small sketchbook and a pencil that had grown short from years of use. For a while he simply looked around the cafe, letting his gaze rest gently on small details, the curve of steam rising from Kamal's tea glass, the careful way Mr. Halden folded the corner of his newspaper page, the soft glow of the hanging lamps above the wooden tables. Then slowly, almost without anyone noticing, his pencil would begin to move across the paper. The sketches he made were quiet things, a hand holding a cup, a window reflecting lamplight, the peaceful posture of someone lost in thought. Sometimes Lena would glance up from her notebook and see the pencil moving across the page, and she would smile faintly before returning to her writing. Neither of them spoke much, yet the quiet creativity at their two tables seemed to fill that corner of the cafe with a gentle energy. Outside, the night continued to settle over the street, wrapping the city in calm darkness. Inside the side street boutique cafe, Daniel's pencil traced its soft lines while the other regulars rested in their familiar places, and together they created a quiet evening scene that felt almost like a painting itself, slow, peaceful, and full of quiet stories waiting to be noticed. As the nights continued to pass, the side street boutique cafe settled into a rhythm so gentle that it almost felt like breathing. Each evening unfolded in nearly the same quiet pattern, yet none of the regulars ever found it boring. Instead, the familiar routine brought a calm comfort, like hearing a favorite melody played softly again and again. Mr. Halden arrived first, as he always did, his newspaper folded neatly beneath his arm. He would take his corner seat, sip his dark coffee, and slowly explore the stories of the day. Not long after, Lena would enter with her small notebook, bringing with her the peaceful focus of someone who carried many thoughts but no hurry to release them. Then Kamal, the taxi driver, would arrive from the city's busy roads, warming his hands around his glass of tea while the long miles of the day quietly faded from his shoulders. And finally Daniel, the artist, would settle by the window, sketching the gentle life of the cafe as if capturing small pieces of time itself. Mr. Armin moved quietly among them all, polishing cups, preparing drinks, and occasionally pausing to look around the room with quiet satisfaction. Though the cafe was small, it seemed to hold a world of calm within its walls. Some evenings the regulars exchanged a few words, simple conversations that drifted slowly through the warm air. Other nights they spoke hardly at all, sharing a silence that felt peaceful rather than empty. The ticking clock above the counter marked the passing minutes like soft footsteps, while the hanging lamps cast warm golden circles across the tables. Outside, the city continued its restless movement, cars passing, distant voices echoing down the street, the wind brushing gently between the buildings. Yet inside the cafe, time felt softer, as if it had chosen to slow down and rest for a while. The regulars did not need excitement or noise to fill their evenings. Instead, they found comfort in small, steady moments, the warmth of a cup in their hands, the quiet company of familiar faces, and the simple knowledge that tomorrow evening the same gentle rhythm would return again, waiting for them beneath the warm lights of the little cafe on the quiet street. One evening, the sky above the quiet street slowly filled with thick gray clouds, and by the time the cafe lamps were glowing warmly inside, a gentle rain had begun to fall. The drops tapped softly against the windows of the side street boutique cafe, creating a calm, steady rhythm that blended beautifully with the peaceful sounds inside. The street outside shimmered under the street lamp as rain gathered in small glowing puddles along the pavement. As always, Mr. Holden arrived first, carefully closing his umbrella at the door and giving it a small shake before stepping inside. His coat carried the cool scent of rain, but his quiet smile appeared as soon as he saw the familiar warmth of the cafe. Mr. Armin placed his usual cup of dark coffee on the table, steam rising slowly as the rain continued its soft tapping outside. Soon after, Lena entered, holding her notebook close to keep it dry beneath her coat. A few raindrops clung to her hair, sparkling briefly in the lamplight before disappearing. She settled by the window and watched the rain for a moment before opening her notebook, as if the quiet storm might offer a few new thoughts for her pages. Kamal arrived next, his taxi parked somewhere down the wet street, the headlights of passing cars reflecting in the puddles outside. He rubbed his hands together happily as Mr. Armin set down his warm glass of tea. "Rain makes the city quieter," he said softly, almost as if sharing a secret with the room. Finally, Daniel stepped inside with his sketchbook tucked safely beneath his jacket. The rainy street outside seemed to interest him even more than usual, and soon his pencil was moving across the page, capturing the reflections of the street lamp and the gentle blur of falling rain. Inside the cafe, the regulars felt wrapped in a special kind of calm that rainy evenings often bring. The soft tapping on the windows, the warm glow of the lights, and the quiet presence of familiar faces made the little cafe feel even more like a safe harbor from the world outside. And as the rain continued its patient rhythm against the glass, the side street boutique cafe held its peaceful glow on the quiet street, like a lantern gently shining through the misty night. On another calm evening, the rain had disappeared and the air outside felt fresh and cool, carrying the quiet scent of the night after the storm. The street glistened faintly beneath the street lamp, and the side street boutique cafe welcomed its regulars with the same soft glow that had become part of their daily rhythm. Inside, the cafe felt especially peaceful, as if the rain from the previous night had washed the world clean and left behind a gentle stillness. Mr. Holden was already in his usual seat, carefully folding the newspaper after finishing the last page. Lena sat by the window with her notebook open, her pen resting quietly between her fingers as she looked out at the calm street. Kemal had arrived not long before and was warming his hands around his small glass of tea, enjoying the slow comfort of the moment. Daniel, at his window table, had just finished another sketch and was quietly studying it beneath the soft lamp above him. That evening, something a little different happened. Instead of remaining entirely in their quiet routines, a few gentle conversations began to drift through the cafe like soft breezes. Kemal mentioned a street musician he had driven earlier that day, someone who played an old violin beneath the bridge by the river. Lena listened with curiosity and asked what the music sounded like, and Kemal tried his best to describe the slow, peaceful melody that had followed his taxi down the street for a few moments. Mr. Holden lowered his newspaper and shared that, many years ago, he had learned to play the violin as a young boy, though he had not touched the instrument in decades. Daniel listened quietly while sketching the small scene around him, the tea glass, the folded newspaper, Lena's thoughtful posture by the window. Even Mr. Armin paused from polishing cups to listen to the conversation, a faint smile resting on his face. The voices remained soft, respectful of the cafe's peaceful atmosphere, but the small exchange brought a gentle warmth that spread through the room. Outside, the night continued calmly. The sky deep and clear above the quiet street. Inside the cafe, the regulars shared their quiet stories, discovering small pieces of each other's lives while the warm lights above them glowed steadily, holding the peaceful evening together like a quiet, comforting song. The evening after their quiet conversation about music arrived with a soft golden sunset that slowly faded into deep blue night. The side street boutique cafe glowed warmly as usual, its windows shining like small lanterns along the peaceful street. Mr. Holden entered first, as he always did, but this time he carried something different beneath his arm. It was a long, narrow case, old but carefully kept, the leather edges worn smooth by many years. Mr. Armin noticed it immediately and raised his eyebrows with gentle curiosity, though he asked no questions. Mr. Holden simply gave a small, thoughtful smile and settled into his usual seat near the corner lamp. Soon the other regulars arrived one by one. Lena took her place by the window with her notebook, Kemal warmed his hands around his evening tea, and Daniel opened his sketchbook quietly at the table nearby. For a little while, the cafe followed its familiar calm rhythm. Cups clinked softly, pages turned, and the clock ticked patiently above the counter. Then Mr. Holden carefully placed the long case on the table and opened it. Inside rested a violin, its wooden surface glowing softly beneath the warm light of the lamp. The instrument looked old but beautiful, as if it had carried many melodies through many years. Kemal leaned forward with quiet interest, while Lena watched with a gentle smile. Mr. Holden lifted the violin slowly, almost respectfully, and held it beneath his chin. For a brief moment, the cafe grew even quieter than usual. Then, very softly, the first note filled the room. The sound was calm and warm, like a slow breeze moving through autumn leaves. Mr. Holden's hands moved carefully, guiding the bow across the strings with a patience that came from long ago. The melody was simple and peaceful, drifting through the cafe like a quiet story without words. Lena closed her notebook and listened. Daniel's pencil paused above his sketchbook, and even Mr. Armand stood still behind the counter for a moment. The music was not loud or dramatic. It was gentle, thoughtful, and full of quiet memories. Outside, the night continued along the silent street, but inside the cafe the soft violin melody wrapped the room in a calm warmth that seemed to slow time itself. And when the final note faded into the quiet air, the regulars remained still for a moment, as if the music had left a peaceful echo floating gently among the warm lights of the little cafe. After the final note of the violin faded gently into the warm air of the cafe, the room rested in a peaceful silence. No one rushed to speak. It was the kind of quiet that felt full rather than empty, as if the melody Mr. Holden had played was still drifting softly through the room like a memory that had not quite settled yet. The hanging lamps above the tables glowed with their usual golden warmth, casting calm circles of light across the wooden floor. Outside, the night had grown deeper, and the quiet street carried only the occasional whisper of a passing breeze. Mr. Holden slowly lowered the violin and placed it carefully back into its case, his movements gentle and thoughtful. Kamal gave a small nod of appreciation, holding his tea glass in both hands as if the warmth of the moment had settled there. Lena looked down at her notebook, but instead of writing immediately, she simply smiled to herself, as though the music had written something in her thoughts that words might not fully capture. Daniel, sitting by the window, quietly resumed his sketching, his pencil moving slowly across the page as he tried to preserve the calm scene around him, the soft lamplight, the quiet faces, the violin case resting on the table. Mr. Armand returned to his quiet work behind the counter, polishing a cup with slow and careful movements. He glanced around the cafe once more, and a peaceful satisfaction appeared in his eyes. The little side street boutique cafe was never a loud or busy place, yet evenings like this reminded him why it mattered. It was a place where small moments could quietly gather and become something meaningful without anyone trying too hard. One by one, the regulars eventually finished their drinks. Chairs moved softly against the wooden floor, coats were gently buttoned, and the small bell above the door rang as each person stepped back into the calm night outside. They did not say many goodbyes, because they all understood something simple and comforting: tomorrow evening, the warm lights would shine again. And on the quiet side street, the little cafe would still be there, waiting patiently with its gentle glow, its familiar tables, and the quiet rhythm of evenings that moved slowly and peacefully, like a story that never truly ends, only pauses until the next calm night begins.